This painting depicts an artist who has fallen asleep whilst reading and dreams of artistic possibilities that might exist. They include teaching young ladies the art of painting, sculpting a bust of Prince Albert, husband of Queen Victoria, and, most importantly, a long procession set in the medieval period headed by a king and queen, who would provide the artist with a range of historic subjects. Corbeau was the son and grandson of watercolour painters and did indeed work for the royal family, who bought from him an illustration of Tennyson's Morte d'Arthur as a gift from the Princess Louise to the Queen herself. The medieval wandering knight or knight-errant who travelled around seeking to do good deeds was a concept very popular with the Victorians. This painting was shown at the Royal Academy in 1870 with a text of Millais' own invention, which was printed in the exhibition catalogue. The Order of Knights-Errant was instituted to protect widows and orphans and secure maidens in distress. The moonlit scene apparently depicts an act of medieval chivalry in which one such knight-errant, clad in armour, based on examples that Millais had seen in the Tower of London, is on the point of freeing a woman tied to a tree. The knight-errant was Millais' first and only attempt at painting the female nude. This is the second time this painting has been exhibited at the Bowes Museum, the first being in 1920 in exchange for the loan of a selected group of old master paintings. Dixie was a highly successful Victorian and Edwardian painter who maintained the detailed descriptive style of the Pre-Raphaelites right up to his death in 1928. He was well known for his reconstructions of medieval and historic scenes, researched down to the last detail. The armour in this painting is copied from a surviving authentic suit now in the United States. The subject matter is taken from a poem by Keats, in which a Christian knight is tempted by an enchantress who condemns him to an unpleasant fate after she seduces him with her eyes and singing. Women in the 19th century paintings were generally depicted as good or bad, whilst men are often depicted as heroes or villains. This painting refers to a real historical event of 1347, the taking of the French port of Calais by the English king Edward III while sparing the lives of a group of prisoners at the intercession of his queen. It was seen as an example of chivalry in an age distinguished by ferociousness and bloodiness in battles. Kings of England, in their capacity as Dukes of Normandy and as claimants for the French crown, played a constant part in military intervention in France, culminating in the English control of Paris in 1419. The French king, inspired by the support of Joan of Arc, stemmed the tide, winning back Paris in 1428 and 1437. The English finally lost control of Calais in 1558. The evident sincerity and intensity of Burne-Jones's work means that even fairy tale themes are persuasive to a modern audience. Here, he depicts a scene from the legend of the Sleeping Beauty, who was cast by a spell with her attendants into a sleep lasting until she was awakened by a kiss from a prince, leaving the rambling briar roses to grow through the figures and furnishings of the royal castle. There are 4 scenes in the sequence: the briar wood, showing the prince entering the castle, the council chamber, showing her advisors asleep, this scene of the garden court, with her handmaidens asleep at the loom, and finally the rose bower itself, showing the princess asleep on a bed. Burne-Jones executed 3 versions of the series, one of which survives complete in the room panelling at Buscott Park, Oxfordshire. The Pre-Raphaelites were fascinated by a certain type of female beauty, often depicted in the medieval or mythological past. Guinevere was the wife of King Arthur and Iseult the mistress of Tristan. Here they are shown in medieval dress by designer William Morris in 2 large final designs or cartoons for a set of 13 windows illustrating the story of Tristan and Iseult for the Bradford merchant Walter Dunlop at his home of Harden Grange near Bingley in Yorkshire. The resulting windows are today in Bradford City Art Gallery. Joan of Arc was a French female warrior whose visions told her to drive the English from France. She was initially very successful, but was finally captured by the English and executed at Rouen. Her reputation was forgotten until her rediscovery in the 19th century. For writers and artists, she had the fascination of taking on a man's role in medieval warfare. We do not know exactly how she dressed, but the artist has enjoyed depicting a strong female figure in man's armour. This panel is a memorial window from the Church of St Nicholas, built in 1895 at Hetton-le-Hole, County Durham. The design was exhibited at the London Arts and Crafts exhibition of 1910. Such depictions of modern heroes or martyrs in armour remained common right up to the time of the First World War. James Archer was a Scottish painter who began his career with a series of Arthurian subjects, including La Morte de Arthur and Sir Lancelot and Queen Guinevere. He moved to London in 1864 and subsequently to the United States and India, where he painted portraits and local scenes. He returned and died in England in 1904. King Arthur was a legendary ancient Christian king from the west of Britain. He sent his knights out in search of the Holy Grail, the vessel used by Christ at the Last Supper and allegedly brought to England. His court was based at Camelot, where he gathered around a round table with his knights, who were distinguished by their chivalry or code of conduct, though in practice they did not always adhere to it. In particular, Sir Lancelot was in love with the king's wife, Queen Guinevere. Arthur is supposed to have died in the Battle of Camlan in the 6th century. His body is said to have been taken to the Isle of Avalon for burial. In 1191, the tombs of Arthur and Guinevere were allegedly found by the monks of the abbey at Glastonbury in Somerset. All traces were lost during the dissolution of the monasteries in 1539. Burne-Jones was the most obsessive of all the Pre-Raphaelites, determined to create and remain in a fantasy medieval world of courtly knights and damsels. Born in Birmingham, he worked in Oxford with Dante Gabriel Rossetti and took up and developed his medieval imagery and style. He was later a close associate of William Morris and provided many stained glass designs for his successful business. In later life, he was heavily influenced by the Italian Renaissance. Here he combines the themes of the medieval world with the styles of the Renaissance, showing the legendary St. George returning with his princess after killing the dragon, with an angel in the background derived from the Italian painting. Charles Alston Collins was the son of a landscape painter and the younger brother of the novelist Wilkie Collins. It is not surprising that his works often had literary content or connotations. Collins fell in love with Rossetti's sister Maria, but turned to painting religious subjects after her rejection of him. This is an early work by Collins, showing Berengaria's alarm, where the wife of King Richard identifies her missing husband's girdle as one offered for sale by a peddler. It is an excellent piece of medieval reconstruction, with great attention paid to the belt, and religious undertones in the depiction of the Bible, open at the page telling of the similar story of when Joseph went missing. And he knew it, and said, "It is my son his coat. An evil beast hath devoured him. Joseph is without doubt rent in pieces." Thankfully, Richard was still alive, and his wife was able to save him. Saint days were days of celebration or commemoration, though practically they became days of feasting and entertainment. Saint Agnes was martyred in Rome in 304 AD, and her feast day falls on the 21st of January. There was a folk belief that on the eve of Saint Agnes, a girl could see her future husband in a dream. In 1820, the English poet John Keats published a poem on the theme in which the lover appears in real life and the pair subsequently flee. Holman Hunt was a founder member of the Pre-Raphaelite Brotherhood, and in his own view, the one who diverged least from their original intentions. This is one of his earliest works with the exact depictions of medieval costume and architecture. The damsel of the Saint Grail, Holy Grail, is a minor character in Thomas Malory's Morte. However, Rossetti included her in some designs illustrating the quest for the Grail, showing her offering the chalice to the knights instead of Christ, as described by Malory. Here, the damsel holds her right hand in a gesture of blessing. Her left hand clasps the Grail and a basket containing the host, while the dove symbolises the Holy Spirit. This is one of a number of watercolours by Rossetti illustrating the legend of St. George, a Christian knight in the Roman army. Having killed the dragon, St. George washes the blood from his hand in his upturned helmet. He watches through the window as a crowd carries the dragon's head in triumph. The princess, whose life he has saved, kneels, kissing his bloodied hands. Rossetti's wife, Lizzie Siddal, modelled for Princess Sabra only days before dying from an overdose of laudanum. Roman de la Rose is a 13th century French poem, a complex story about love and loss, one of many that troubadours recited at royal courts of love. This painting derives from an earlier design for the frontispiece of Rossetti's early Italian poets, a collection of his translations of this poetry first published together in 1861. Rossetti has taken his visual inspiration from medieval illuminated manuscripts that he saw at the British Museum and elsewhere. This painting shows a medieval artist in his studio painting a model posing as St. Catherine. She holds a palm branch which symbolises her martyrdom and a wheel, the instrument of execution with which she was threatened. During the 1850s, Rossetti focused on producing watercolours which he sold privately to individual collectors. This picture is the only oil painting he completed at this time. A leading medieval text for Pre-Raphaelites was Sir Thomas Malory's Morte d'Arthur, which sets down the story of King Arthur and his knights and how they gathered about a round table before setting out in quest for the Holy Grail. Allegedly brought to England by Joseph of Arimathea, the uncle of Jesus' mother Mary, Rossetti here unites the two scenes from the text. One relates to Percival, who achieves the quest grail with his fellow knights Galahad and Bors. The other relates to his sister, who gives her life to heal a woman who could only be saved by the blood of a virgin. Rossetti shows the knights receiving the grail before an altar, whilst beside them Percival's sister lies on the ground, awaiting burial.